Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I want to share a story that starts on one of the craziest shopping days of the year, Black Friday. But this isn't just about sales or crowds. It's about a man named Ethan who lost everything, and a woman named Madison who helped him find something money could never buy, hope, love, and a new beginning. It's a story about how one chaotic day can change your entire life, and how sometimes the best things in the world aren't a tea on sale. They were found in the moments we least expect. The morning of November 29th, 2024, broke with a strange kind of tension in the air, the kind that comes right before chaos disguised as celebration. And for the people of Ridgewood, a quiet suburban town outside Chicago, the day everyone had been waiting for, some with greed, others with desperation, had finally arrived. Black Friday. The first light of dawn glowed faintly on the long, curving lines that had already formed outside the Ridgewood Mall, where hundreds of shoppers waited wrapped in coats and scarves, eyes burning with a mixture of fatigue and anticipation. Among them stood Ethan Monroe, a 32-year-old man whose worn-out sneakers and faded hoodie told a story money couldn't hide. He wasn't there for the thrill of buying. He was there to survive. Life had been unkind to Ethan. He'd lost his job at the auto repair shop 3 months earlier when the company downsized, and his mother's medical bills were piling higher than the Chicago snow that would soon fall. His younger sister, Chloe, had just turned 16 and dreamed of becoming a photographer. But the camera she wanted was a distant fantasy, buried beneath overdue rent notices and unpaid prescriptions. Still, Ethan promised her he'd get it, no matter what. And that promise was why he stood in that freezing line outside an electronics store, fingers numb, heart-pounding eyes fixed on the glass doors like a soldier before battle. Across town, Madison Hale, the assistant manager of Ridgewood Mall's biggest retail store, adjusted her name tag in the mirror and tried to smile, though her reflection didn't smile back. She had been working at Tech World for 5 years, and every Black Friday felt like a test of endurance. 12-hour shifts, endless crowds, and the endless sound of scanners beeping like machines at a hospital for capitalism. This year, however, things were different. The company had announced massive discounts, one so steep they would push employees to the breaking point. Madison's boss, Mr. Crane, had warned her that inventory theft was expected to rise, and any missing products would come out of employee paychecks. "Keep your eyes open," he'd said, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "Boss Mode." Desperate people do desperate things. Madison knew he was right, but she also knew desperate people weren't always thieves. Some were just trying to stay alive. By 5 a.m., the doors opened. The crowd erupted like a dam breaking, surging forward in a frenzy of flashing phones, stomping boots, and shouts echoing against the walls. Ethan was swallowed by the chaos, pushed and pulled until he reached the aisle where the cameras were displayed. His hands trembled as he grabbed the last Canon EOS Rebel on the shelf, clutching it against his chest like treasure. Around him, people screamed, fought, and cursed, but he didn't care. He'd done it. For a brief, fragile moment, hope bloomed inside him again. But then, as he made his way toward the registers, a tall man in a black jacket bumped into him hard. The box slipped from Ethan's grip and crashed to the floor. When he bent to pick it up, the stranger was already holding it. "Hey, that's mine," Ethan said, breathless. The man turned, his face cold and sharp. "First come, first serve," he replied, smirking. Ethan's stomach twisted. "I had it first," he insisted. But before he could say more, the stranger shoved him backward, sending him stumbling into a display rack. Security rushed over, separating the two, and by the time Ethan caught his breath, the man was gone, with the camera. At the front of the store, Madison had seen the altercation on the security monitor. She recognized Ethan. He'd come in before, always polite, always looking, but rarely buying. Something about the hopelessness in his eyes struck her, the way he stood there staring after the man who stole his chance. She wanted to help, but couldn't. There were rules, cameras, and a job she couldn't afford to lose. By noon, the store looked like a battlefield, empty shelves, broken boxes, and a trail of discarded packaging that told stories of small victories and bigger losses. When the last wave of shoppers cleared out, Madison slumped behind the counter, exhausted, but her thoughts lingered on Ethan. She didn't know his name then, but she remembered his face, his quiet defeat. Outside, Ethan sat on the curb near the parking lot, snow beginning to fall around him, melting into his hair. His phone buzzed with a message from Chloe. "Did you get it?" He stared at the screen, thumbs frozen, unable to lie but unwilling to crush her hope. He typed back, "Not yet, but I will." Then he turned off the phone and stared out at the horizon, where the gray sky met the black asphalt, and thought about how unfair the world could be, how some people had more than they could ever use, while others were fighting just to give one small gift. That night, as the mall lights dimmed and cleaning crews swept away the evidence of human hunger disguised as bargains, Madison locked up her office and stepped out into the cold. Across the lot, she saw Ethan still sitting there, hands in his pockets, shivering. Something in her heart pulled her toward him. She hesitated, then walked over. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay?" Ethan looked up, startled. "Yeah," he said after a pause. "Just waiting for a ride." But Madison could see the truth. His car wasn't there, his phone was dead, and his eyes were empty. She took a deep breath. "I saw what happened earlier," she said. "I'm sorry about that. People can be ruthless on days like this." Ethan gave a tired smile. "Yeah, guess I should have expected it." She hesitated, then added, "I think there's one camera left in the back. It's a return. Slightly scratched, but still works. I could set it aside for you, maybe even get you an employee discount." Ethan's eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "Why not?" she said. "It's Black Friday, right? Everyone deserves at least one good thing." They talked for a while after that, about work, family, dreams, and how strange it was that a day meant for joy could bring out the worst and the best in people. By the time Madison left, she had decided to bend the rules a little. She couldn't fix Ethan's life, but maybe she could help him keep his promise to his sister. What she didn't know was that Mr. Crane had been watching the cameras even after closing, and he saw everything. The next morning, Ethan woke to the pale light creeping through the blinds of his small apartment. He had fallen asleep on the couch with his jacket still on, the ache in his body reminding him of the previous day's chaos. He rubbed his eyes and saw his sister Chloe curled up on the other end of the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her laptop open with photos she'd edited from her school project. Her hair was a mess, and her tired smile nearly broke his heart. "Did you get it?" she asked quietly, already knowing the answer from the look in his eyes. Ethan forced a small grin. "Not yet, kiddo, but there's still hope." He stood and stretched, trying to shake off the disappointment. He didn't tell her about the man who had shoved him or the embarrassment he felt standing helpless in a crowd of strangers. He didn't mention Madison either. Not yet. Something about that moment felt fragile, like it wasn't meant to be spoken aloud until it became real. He just said, "I'll figure something out," and meant it with every tired breath he took. At Tech World, Madison walked into work with a knot in her stomach. She barely slept, replaying the conversation she'd had with Ethan, wondering if she'd gone too far by offering to help. Mr. Crane was already waiting by her office door, arms crossed, his expression as cold as the winter air outside. "Morning, Madison," he said flatly. "Care to explain why you were offering store property to a random man after hours?" Her throat went dry. He wasn't random," she began, but he cut her off. "Save it. I saw the footage. I've already reported the incident to corporate. You're on thin ice." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "We can't afford charity cases around here. If you want to hand out discounts, do it with your own money." Madison clenched her fists at her sides. "Understood," she said, biting down her anger. She spent the rest of the day in a fog of frustration, trying to focus on customers while silently plotting her escape from a job that drained her more than it paid her. Later that evening, as the crowds thinned and the cleaning staff began their rounds, Madison found herself standing by the returns counter, staring at the small, slightly scratched Canon camera she had hidden behind a stack of boxes. She thought of Ethan again. His quiet voice, the way he spoke about his sister, how his eyes lit up for just a second when she mentioned helping. Against her better judgment, she took out her phone and sent him a text from the number she had pulled off his credit inquiry form. "Hey, this is Madison from Tech World. I have that camera. Meet me outside the east entrance around 8. She stared at the message for a long time before pressing send. At 7:55, Ethan stood outside in the cold again, his breath fogging in the air. He wasn't sure she'd actually show up, and part of him felt guilty for even coming. He couldn't afford much, even with a discount. But when Madison stepped out carrying a small box wrapped in brown paper, something inside him eased. I got approval for a damaged goods sale, she said quietly, though they both knew it was a lie. You can have it for $50. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. I can't let you do that. You're not letting me do anything, she said with a smirk. I'm just trying to make sure your sister gets her Christmas gift. He reached into his pocket and handed her a wrinkled $50 bill, money he'd been saving for groceries. Thank you, he said softly. You have no idea what this means. Madison smiled, brushing snow from her hair. Maybe I do. For a while, life seemed to take a turn for the better. Chloe's joy when she unwrapped the camera on Christmas morning made every sacrifice worth it. She spent hours taking photos of everything: their apartment, the stray cat that wandered near their window, the skyline glowing at sunset. She entered a local photography contest in February, and to Ethan's surprise, she won first place. The prize was small, just a $500 gift card and some exposure. But for her, it was the start of a dream taking shape. Ethan found part-time work at a warehouse and picked up odd jobs fixing cars in neighbors' garages. Madison, meanwhile, had quietly handed in her resignation to Tech World in January. She took a position at a small electronics startup in the city, finally breaking free from Mr. Crane's shadow. Still, she found herself thinking of Ethan now and then, wondering if he ever used that camera again, if his sister had done something wonderful with it. By the time summer rolled around, their paths crossed again, though not by accident. Chloe's photography exhibit was opening at a community art center downtown, and Ethan stood by her side, nervous but proud. He had borrowed a suit from his neighbor and spent the morning helping her hang her photos, images that captured ordinary beauty. A man selling flowers on a rainy day, a mother laughing with her child, an old couple holding hands on a park bench. As the guests began to arrive, Chloe beamed. She's here, she whispered. Ethan turned to see Madison walking toward them, wearing a navy coat and holding a small bouquet of lilies. I told you she'd come, Chloe teased. Madison smiled as she approached. I heard there was a rising star in the building, she said warmly. Ethan laughed, scratching the back of his neck. Guess you've been following our story. Just a little, she said. The night was perfect until it wasn't. Toward the end of the event, Ethan received a call from the hospital. His mother had collapsed at her care home. Panic washed over him as he and Chloe rushed out, Madison following close behind. By the time they arrived, it was too late. His mother had suffered a severe heart attack. The next few days blurred together, a fog of grief, paperwork, and quiet tears. Madison stayed by their side through it all, helping with arrangements, comforting Chloe when Ethan couldn't find the words. At the funeral, standing beneath a gray sky, Ethan realized how rare it was for someone to care when they didn't have to. Madison had started as a stranger, but now she felt like something more, a part of the fragile thread holding his world together. Months passed. Fall crept in again. The leaves turned gold and crimson, and Ridgewood prepared once more for another Black Friday. But this time, things were different. Ethan had started a small online business repairing electronics, using skills from his old job. It wasn't much, but it was growing. Chloe had received a scholarship to study photography at a local college, thanks in part to a portfolio Madison helped her compile. Madison, now managing operations at her new company, had built a life of calm after years of chaos. Yet something unspoken lingered between her and Ethan, a quiet affection neither had dared to voice. As November 28, 2025, approached the eve of another Black Friday, they met again at the same mall where their story began. The mall was brighter this year, renovated and ready for another wave of madness. Ethan walked beside Madison through the polished aisles, both of them half smiling at the memory of their first meeting. Hard to believe it's been a year, she said. Feels like a lifetime, he replied. They stopped near the electronics store. Tech World had closed down earlier that year, replaced by a small local shop called Brightest Electronics, owned by none other than Madison herself. She had taken a risk, using her savings and connections to start her own business, one that valued people over profit. "You did it," Ethan said proudly. "You built something real." She looked at him, eyes soft. "We both did, Ethan. You fixed things. I built things. Maybe that's what we do best." But the day wasn't done with them yet. Just as they were leaving, chaos erupted at the far end of the mall. A group of looters broke through a side entrance, rushing in before security could react. Screams echoed, alarms blared, and in an instant the calm turned into panic. Ethan grabbed Madison's hand, pulling her behind a pillar as people fled in every direction. One of the looters, a man in a black jacket, ran past carrying stolen goods. Ethan froze. It was him, the same man from a year ago, the one who had stolen the camera. Rage burned inside him, the memory of humiliation flashing before his eyes. Without thinking, he chased after him, heart pounding. Madison shouted his name, but he didn't stop. He caught up to the man outside near the parking lot, grabbing his arm. "You remember me?" Ethan shouted. The man turned, startled, then sneered. "Still chasing scraps, huh?" Ethan's fist clenched. "Not anymore." They struggled, slipping on the icy pavement until the man swung wildly, hitting Ethan across the jaw. Ethan fell back, but just as the man raised his arm again, security arrived, tackling him to the ground. Madison ran up, breathless, tears in her eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked, helping Ethan to his feet. He winced but nodded. "Yeah," he said, wiping blood from his lip. "Guess Black Friday wanted one last round?" She laughed shakily through her relief. "You're insane," she said. "Maybe," he replied, "but I'm done losing things that matter." The police took the looter away, and the chaos slowly subsided. As the mall lights dimmed once again, Madison and Ethan stood in the quiet parking lot, the cold wind brushing against them. He looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who had changed his life without even meaning to. "You know," he said softly, "last year I thought Black Friday was just about taking, but maybe it's also about finding out what's worth keeping." Madison smiled, her breath visible in the frosty air. "Maybe that's the best kind of deal," she whispered. And as they walked toward the car, side by side, the snow began to fall. Soft, silent, endless, covering the scars of a world that had taken so much, and finally, given something back. Winter deepened across Ridgewood, and by January 2026, the town was wrapped in a white stillness that seemed to erase the noise of everything that had come before. For Ethan, life no longer felt like a series of battles he had to win just to breathe. His small repair business, which had started in his cramped living room, had grown into a modest workshop downtown. The faded sign above the door read, "Monroe Fix-It Shop," painted by Chloe herself as a surprise. Each morning, he opened the doors early, turning on the lights with a quiet sense of pride that came from building something with his own hands. He still thought about that night outside the mall, the fight, the chaos, the way Madison had looked at him afterward, eyes wide with fear and something deeper, something that felt like love hidden behind the panic. They had kept in touch every day since then, calling after work, sharing dinners, laughing about how strange it was that a shopping day born of greed had somehow tied their fates together. Madison's store, Brightside Electronics, had become a small-town success, drawing customers not through flashy discounts or manipulative deals, but through trust. She hired local teens, treated them with respect, and donated old stock to community centers. Her business philosophy was simple. We don't chase Black Friday, we build every day. And slowly, that saying began to spread around town. People admired her for it. But for Madison, what she valued most wasn't the recognition. It was the quiet evenings when she'd walk into Ethan's shop after closing, holding 2 cups of coffee, and they'd sit on the counter, talking about everything and nothing until the clock struck midnight. Chloe, now in her first year of college, was thriving beyond anyone's expectations. Her photography had been featured in a regional art magazine, and she had begun volunteering to teach photography to underprivileged kids at a community center. One weekend in March, she told Ethan and Madison about a new exhibition she was curating, titled Reflections of Ordinary Grace. When Ethan asked her what it meant, she smiled and said, "It's about people who survived the storm and still find beauty in the ruins." Madison had looked at Ethan then, and they both knew exactly who she was talking about. The exhibition was scheduled for April, and by then, the town had shaken off the winter chill, replaced by the soft warmth of spring. On the opening night, as guests walked through the gallery, Ethan stood beside Madison, his arm resting lightly around her shoulders, feeling a calm he hadn't felt in years. The last photo in the exhibit was one Chloe had secretly taken. A candid shot of Ethan and Madison sitting together in his shop, both laughing over a spilled cup of coffee, sunlight streaming through the window behind them. Beneath it was a small caption. "Sometimes the best things we find aren't on sale. They find us." Madison's eyes glistened when she saw it. "She's good," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "She learned from the best," he said, looking at her. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and the music faded, Ethan stepped outside for some air. The streets were quiet except for the soft hum of passing cars and the distant laughter of people leaving the event. Madison joined him, her hands tucked in her coat pockets, her breath forming small clouds in the cool night air. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "Every day. If that guy hadn't pushed me, if you hadn't seen it on the camera, if you hadn't texted me, maybe none of this would have happened." "Fate's funny like that," she said, smiling faintly. "Sometimes it hides behind chaos, waiting for us to see it." He turned to her then, studying her face illuminated by the streetlight, and said, "Madison, I don't want to keep pretending like this isn't real. You've been there through everything, my mom, Chloe, the business. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it." For a long moment, she just looked at him, her eyes shining with tears she didn't bother to hide. "You already have me, Ethan," she whispered. Then she stepped closer and kissed him, slow and sure, the kind of kiss that felt less like a beginning and more like something that had always been waiting to happen. As months passed, their bond deepened. By summer, they had combined their savings and opened a small community hub between their two stores, a place where kids could learn photography, electronics repair, and basic life skills for free. They called it the Workshop, and on its opening day, the mayor gave a short speech, praising their vision for turning a day once known for greed into a legacy of giving. Ethan smiled as he listened, his hand entwined with Madison's. He thought of his mother then, imagining her proud smile from somewhere beyond. Chloe stood near the entrance, snapping photos of the smiling crowd, her camera flashing like a heartbeat. For Ridgewood, the workshop became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in a world obsessed with sales and status, kindness could still find a way to thrive. The following November marked the second anniversary of that fateful Black Friday, and the town decided to hold a local event called Bright Friday, organized by Madison and Ethan. Instead of early morning stampedes and greedy shoppers, people came together for a charity market. Local vendors sold handmade goods, students performed music, and all proceeds went to support struggling families. There were no fights, no chaos, no broken shelves, just laughter, connection, and the warmth of community. As Ethan stood on the stage giving a short speech, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. 2 years ago, he began, I thought Black Friday was the worst day of my life, but maybe it had to happen that way. Because sometimes when life knocks you down, it's just making space for something better to stand up. The crowd applauded, and when he stepped down, Madison hugged him tight. "You still hate Black Friday?" she teased. He laughed. "Not anymore. It gave me you." As the night deepened and snow began to fall again, soft and slow like memory returning, the lights of Ridgewood glowed warm against the dark sky. Chloe stood near the edge of the square, taking photos of families laughing, kids chasing each other, and the way Ethan and Madison looked at each other like two people who had finally found home. For her, it was more than a picture. It was proof that even the coldest seasons could bring something beautiful. Years from now, people in Ridgewood would still talk about that first bright Friday, about the man who once lost everything in a Black Friday crowd, and the woman who helped him find something far more valuable. But for Ethan and Madison, it was simpler than that. It was just life, ordinary yet extraordinary, built not on bargains or luck, but on small acts of kindness that had changed everything. And as the snow continued to fall, blanketing the streets in white, Ethan whispered to Madison, "Guess every storm really does clear someday." She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Yeah," she said quietly, "and sometimes it leaves behind a new beginning." And that is how one Black Friday turned from a day of chaos into a story of redemption, love, and second chances. Ethan and Madison learned that sometimes life's darkest moments lead us to the brightest places. So remember, it's not about what you buy, it's about what you become when everything else is gone. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because next time, I've got another story that will remind you just how powerful hope can be. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share with your friends and family so you don't miss the next powerful story coming your way. Drop a heart and comment, like and subscribe my channel, and visit my channel for more interesting stories videos.